slides are up. There we go. But and you guys should be able to still work offline. It's just a matter of saving stuff. So for today's opener, we talked about all three of the different periods of the Cenozoic. And what for the first two periods, what were the top predators? Land predators, because we didn't really talk too much about the oceans. I did at the very end. What was the thing that would whack you with its head and then tear your throat after it knocked you out? What were those things called? Or what were they? I showed you a couple pictures of them. They were bigger than me. They were birds. They were gigantic birds. They were the leftovers of the dinosaurs, and we've said this repeatedly, that that's what a bird is a highly evolved dinosaur. That is what they turned into. It's the surviving versions.
They evolved from rats.
Pigeons?
Yes.
Well,
That's correct.
all right, now the ones that you think of, the saber and the scimitar-toothed cats, when were they top predators? Because they were not top predators in the Paleogene and the Neogene. When did the saber-toothed cat live, y'all? What time period? What did we call that time period? No! There's a fancy name. Ice Age is what everybody calls it, but that's not the scientific term for the Ice Age. Which part of it were the Ice Age is in? It's the part that we're living in right now. It's the Quaternary specifically. It's the Pleistocene. If you don't know how to spell it, you're going to see it here in just a minute. Now, it depends if I'm talking about the period, which is the Quaternary. That's where we're at right now. We're just in the second epoch of the Quaternary, the Ice Age beasts. Let's start with a P. The Ice Age beasts, all of them. Some of them started towards the end of the Pliocene, which is the end of the Neogene, but most of them were in the Pleistocene, which is the beginning of the Quaternary. All right, so the Paleogene is the first of the three periods. Okay, just like the Mesozoic had three different sections. Okay, the Cenozoic has three major periods. We've already said multiple times the end of the Cretaceous, all of the non-avian dinosaurs went bye-bye. The crocodilians are not dinosaurs, they're older, they made it through, specifically because they were more of an aquatic type lizard. Your flying reptiles had already gone extinct, all of your marine reptiles had gone extinct. In fact, those two sections, with the exception of the largest of the pteranodons, they were already extinct by the time that the asteroid slammed into the Earth right off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. But the period is the Paleogene. It's split into three smaller parts. Not all of them have three parts. One of them is two. The Paleocene is the first part. The Eocene was the cooling down. The Paleocene was the hottest part. We're going to go into this in more depth today. And then the Oligocene was when the forests were being replaced with grass. That was the answer to yesterday's opener. What plants, what specific type of plant was it that allowed the herbivores to grow so big? And it's not, you think of grass as what's in your yard. Grass is anything that is a grain. So wheat, corn is, believe it or not, a type of grass. It's a very different type of grass, but it is. This period is the longest of the three. We're going to talk about the next one tomorrow, and then the one that we're in the next day. From the death of the dinosaurs, so the end of the Cretaceous, up to 23 million years ago. We're going to do Paleocene first, because it's the first of the three. This is the longest of the, well, no, actually it's not. From 65 to 56 million years ago. Yesterday, and I really meant to look up, because in second period they asked me why in the northern hemisphere did you have the placentals, like things that carry it to term, but in the southern hemisphere they were the marsupials, and they gave birth to live young, but they couldn't like at all take care of themselves. They were like very undeveloped embryos. But most of our type, the placentals, the ones that carry things to term, whether they can get up and run just a few minutes after, or it's like our young that take forever to grow up, they happened in this particular epoch. Your first hoofed animals. Okay, so now there's different types. You've got some with one toe, which is the modern horse. Okay, there's some with 2 toes, like deer, like pigs, like they're called, the ungulates have different numbers of toes. But they started developing early on. I mentioned this yesterday, horses, and I'll show you like the picture. They were about this tall and they looked like dogs and they had 4 toes. They started losing toes over time. You want, well, I mean, you can go to the museum and look at their skeletons, but they don't have any of them like that anymore. Most of your mammals at the beginning of this period were all about 20 pounds or lighter. They were not long. And now, okay, hold on. This is going to be like this all day long. Just the internet is really, really, really spotty right now. That's well, I don't know what the problem is. Y'all, if I cut out like that, it's the internet going up and down. So, your carnivores, they didn't look like our modern day cats and dogs, but those are called creodonts. Most of the creodonts went extinct at the end of the Ice Age. They didn't make it through. And like I said, the earliest of the primates were at the end of this period. Now, not our ancestors specifically, that was later. Let's see here. Airbirds. This was the answer to part of the opener. They were over 6 feet tall. They were your top predators for the first 2 periods. So for the Paleogene, which is the one that we're talking about today, and the Neogene, the one that we're talking about tomorrow, Europe and North America were still together in the earlier part of the period. Like we still had major tectonics going on. And I did the bulk of the tectonics yesterday. Australia is still attached to Antarctica. Later on, it and New Guinea, its little island on the right-hand side, they popped off and then they moved further north, and Antarctica moved further south and put itself right over the South Pole. India had not yet slammed into Asia. We don't have all those mountains, not the ones that cooled this period off drastically. Not early on. Early on. So one more there is. It was extremely hot. And it was extremely heavily forested, like jungle kind of forested, not like what you think of around here. South America and Africa, they've split, and so the Atlantic Ocean is going in between those. So we have this, like I said, this is early on in the first of the 3 parts of the age of the mammals. Hopefully, I'm going to have to pay close attention to see if that thing shimmies around again. Your large, like the sauropods, all those things were gone. Okay, your herbivores now were smaller. It allowed your forests to populate. There wasn't anything that was like munching them down. When if I go back to the Mesozoic, those big long neck dinosaurs, the titanosaurs, they destroyed everything in their path. They just ate it. And then they pooped it out and they fertilized stuff, but they would destroy all of the vegetation. Without these lawnmowers, if you will, taking all the plants away, they had the ability to grow much, much larger. Angiosperms, they started in the Mesozoic. These are the flowering plants, the ones that produce fruit. They went bonkers in the Cenozoic. And you had dense jungle forests on the entire planet. Planet-wise, there weren't seasons like there are now. Planet-wise, the temperature was much warmer. It was much more consistent. It just meant that you didn't have like an alternating summer and winter like we do now. And they're calling for a really hot summer this summer.
That's awesome.
Well, I mean, I definitely don't like -4 or whatever it was when we had all that ice.
It's up to 100.
Oh gosh, no. Are you kidding
Well,
me?
yeah.
No. There's a certain point when it's just too hot.
I want the water to boil.
Okay.
Put things outside.
So that's disgusting.
Put things outside.
It's bitch. The Paleocene, like I said, was extremely hot. The hottest part, I don't know if I put it on here. I don't think I did. No, I did not. Oh, I went too far. The Paleocene, Eocene. So at the end of the Paleocene and then beginning the Eocene was the hottest recorded temperature that we have on record with the oxygen isotopes, the ice cores. Actually, that would not be an ice core. That would be a sedimentary core from underneath the ocean. Planet-wide, like including the North and the South Pole, you're looking at about 70, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which doesn't sound super hot, but y'all, the entire planet, that was the average temperature. So there would have been some areas that were a little warmer, okay, which would be more towards the equator because it has more direct beams from the sun. And then towards the poles, yes, it would have been a little bit cooler, but it's not like it is today. There was zero ice in this time period. The oceans were 1,000 feet taller than they are now. This area would have been underwater, like 280 feet-ish underwater, the surface of the ocean. The fish didn't care. They had more room to roam. Sharks were going crazy. Megalodon was not around yet. It's much, much, much later. It's a quaternary predator. But like I said, very, very, very warm, not just in the air, but also on the oceans. And it was warm enough that we had absolutely no ice caps. And then once again, Antarctica had not like moved itself in the right position to do this anyways. And we still had continents that were stuck together, and North and South America hadn't joined to split the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean. All of that comes much later. The Paleocene, Eocene maximum, like I said, this was the in recorded records, okay, so in the sediment from underneath the ocean, the hottest that we can measure comes from this time period. That is actually the boundary between the two different epochs, first two epochs of the Paleogene. Mid-latitude just means like about where we are, okay, so like 30, 40 degrees north or south of the equator. It was the same as being at the equator. It was literally like living in a tropical jungle. And like I said, these forests went all the way to both poles, but this warm, and I had some differing numbers on how long it lasted, but most of them agreed it was about 200,000 years worth of intense global warming. I hate using that term all the time, but that's the term that we give for when things are hot. They haven't really used global cooling very much anymore. Heck, when I was your age, we were supposed to have acid rain and another ice age, and then planes were supposed to fall out of the sky in turn of the year 2000, and all the freaking Nostradamus and the rapture and all that good stuff. Yeah, none of that happened. This did happen.
Well, one plane did build in 2001.
I know. I watched the second one hit live
That
on
was a bad
television
joke. I'm sorry.
right before I was going to biochemistry class in college, and they did not cancel school at Texas A&M. They didn't cancel school when the bonfire fell either. I remember walking right past that as they were pulling bodies out of it.
What?
Bonfire when the stack fell. That was my first semester at A&M. The valedictorian of my sister's high school graduating class was one of the first four that was pulled out and pronounced deceased. That was not a fun day on campus. I still have ashes from the last bonfire that burnt too. And I have back the battalion, the school paper that had all the pictures in it. It's probably worth a lot of money now that I think about it now. All right, so the next one, the Eocene, this is from 56 to 38 million years ago. Okay. The Paleocene was the extremely hot, okay, and then we had that thermal maximum was the boundary. The Eocene was the beginning of the cool off, okay, not the ice ages yet. That's way towards the end. That'll be on Thursday. The things that lived in the really dense jungles, they couldn't afford to be large because large things have a hard time walking through thick brush. Okay, the smaller things can squeeze in between the gaps. And that was another reason, besides the fact that smaller things made it free from the dinosaurs anyways. Most of your mammals, now I'm not talking about things in the ocean. Things in the ocean were getting huge. But most of your mammals stayed under about 20 pounds, 10 kilos, 2.2 pounds per kilo. But like I said, those terror birds, Those were your top predators. Terrifying things. I don't know if this was a class that brought up the shoebill stork. They look, their beak is not eagle-like. It's almost more pelican-like, but their body style is very similar to that of these terror birds. It's just it's not an aggressive predator. It's more of like a fish eater. It's a stork. Eats frogs, but they're huge. They're like as tall as I am. It's messed up looking. I'm going to show you a couple different pictures. I didn't put the Eohippus on here like I wanted to. I forgot to put that on here. I could have done a whole lesson on the evolution of the horse and the whale.
You should.
Well, I can't
Talk
fit
about
it.
horse.
I can't fit it in. But I guarantee you, if you go to any museum that has a dinosaur exhibit, you're going to see, if they don't have an Eohippus, they'll have a Mesohippus. It's the one that has 3 toes instead of 4. That's the next evolutionary step towards the one-toed, or just the hoof, which a hoof is a toe. If you did not know that, it's just a hard nail
So
on
horses have 4 toes.
They got 1 toe on each foot.
Yeah, 4 toes.
They do. And you have to trim them, and it's like just a thick nail on the outer part. You've never seen how horses shod. They literally cut, like trim the nail, trim the hoof, and then they scrape all the poop out underneath, and it's soft underneath. You've never, okay. Anyways,
No,
yeah, you have to maintain and goats too, you have to maintain their hooves or they'll overgrow and it'll like mess up their legs, and they're gonna have to be put down because the horses take a lot of maintenance. You gotta like shave their teeth, their wolf teeth in the back. They'll grow into their gums and they won't be able to eat. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. Like, oh, let's get a pony. I'm like, do you realize that's as expensive as a car to maintain every single year? Shots and feed and bedding and lodging. If you don't have a stable, they're expensive. All right, so anyways, the temperature of the planet was about 30 degrees Celsius. That, and see, 20 degrees Celsius is room temperature, 70 degrees. So just to put that in perspective, in the Eocene, the circumpolar, which means goes around the pole, Antarctic, the South, current was created. And this changed the way that the ocean moved its water. And that allowed for a decrease in the temperature, which basically choked the jungle forests, killed them off, and then gave open areas to allow for, now it had not developed yet, but to allow for expansion of grass once it developed. Opened up spaces. The animals were not constricted by having to live in constricting environments, and they started their increase in size. Okay, so your herbivores are going to start that. Then your predators are going to start getting larger because their prey is giving them more energy. There's more meat for them to be able to live off of. Whales are almost completely aquatic at this point. They literally, the predecessor of the whale, because everything started in the ocean, went from the ocean to the land, then decided, okay, it went back to the water. Seasons came back. So it wasn't just hot all the time. It wasn't just jungle all the time. We started having cooler winters and warmer summers. Not necessarily like we have today, but they started returning. And if you do not know what a savanna is, it's like an used in Africa, is that we don't normally call our prairies savannas, we call them prairies, but it's the same thing. If you do not know what the word advent means, it just means that it started. It evolved. I don't realize when I'm typing these that I'm doing it with the way that my brain thinks, and not that I'm trying to like put anybody down. You may not know what some of the vocabulary is. An ungulate are things like cows and deer and goats and sheep, herbivores. You have 2 major types: perissodactyl, odd-toed, and artiodactyl, even-toed. Dactyl is like fingers and toes, is what that. It's just a medical term for it. The odd-toed would be the horses, the rhinos, and a tapir. don't know if you know what a tapir is or not, but they still exist today. The even-toed would be deer, cows, and sheep. I mean, I can't do every single animal that ever existed. Now, what happens here is North America and Europe start pulling apart. So now the Atlantic isn't just going between South America and Africa, because that happened first, but it's now also going between North America and Europe. But North and South America still have not come together, so we don't have a separation between the Atlantic and the Pacific yet. Right. First horses had 4 toes. Okay, the first true horse, or I guess ancestor of the horse, was called Eohippus. It was only about a foot tall at the shoulder. So it literally looked like a dog. Like that's what the skeleton looks like. If you take a current dog skeleton and you put it next to an Eohippus, it's very difficult to tell them apart. The first are the elephant's ancestors, which did not really look like an elephant. I'm going to put a picture of it up here. I'm not even try to pronounce that. Moratherium. I'm going to have to tell the internet to pronounce that one for me. They evolved in Africa. We did get some in both elephants and rhinos in North America, but that came a little bit later. It's hard to see. This is actually not an Eohippus. This is a Mesohippus. It has 3 toes, not 4 toes. That's the second one in the evolution of the horse, and it was larger. This is what the first of the elephants looked like. Almost more like a hippo. It's truly more like a rhino, and it didn't have a long trunk yet. That came later. And they were smaller. They were about this tall. But that's of course, it's an artist's rendition. I guess I could have put the skeletons up here, but all right, the Eocene. You have 2 major groups of aquatic mammals. You have the cetaceans, which is how that word is pronounced. So, and once again, they're not fish. They breathe air. They don't have gills. They have lungs. So all of the whales, okay, all of the dolphins, and then the one that looks like a dolphin, but the tail is flipped the other direction, the porpoises, those are the cetaceans. The sirens are your water cows, your manatees, and your dugongs. They look very, very similar. They just come from different parts of the world. The ancestor to the whale Indohyus looked like a possum. Believe it or not, this is the great granddaddy of all of the whales.
It had legs.
It was basically like a raccoon.
Was that a land animal?
Yes, it was a land animal. And for whatever reason, maybe they preferred to eat fish. I don't know. They started becoming more and more and more aquatic. Now, this took hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years for that matter, for it to change from this raccoon thing. I don't know what, like a mix between a kangaroo and a rat, and I don't know, but that is the ancestor to the whale.
How does that even happen? That small.
I'm gonna one of the slides I have shows the skeletal advances of the whales. It's not like every single step of the way, but yeah, believe it or not, that's a whale ancestor. Bats also started forming in the Eocene. And this is the one. So here's the Indohyus. Okay, this was that raccoon thing. And as they started becoming more, and they were little, okay, as they started becoming larger, it looks more like a crocodile in this one, started becoming more and more and more aquatic. Now, even modern whales still have the remnants of their back legs. It has that hip girdle in the back. Now, you have to look at the skeleton or cut a whale open to see it. It's not, they have little stubby legs sticking off of them down there. But that is the evolution going from the rat thing to what you think of as a modern whale. You know, you don't need to pull that off the internet. I didn't put it into your canvas paper. All right, the next one, the Oligocene. 38 to 24 million years ago. This is when grasses are getting their foothold. It wasn't until the next period, though, that grass really went bonkers. The climate was drier, it was colder, so all of those heavy forests, especially at the poles, are being choked out. Grasslands are taking over, open spaces, animals are starting to get larger. You had any of the things that you think of that run around and eat grass, they're everywhere. That is the bulk of your herbivores. We still have terror birds. We do not have saber-toothed cats yet. The earliest of the saber-toothed ancestors did not start evolving until the end of the following period, the one that we're going to do tomorrow. And they were some of your top predators. There were others actually that were way worse than the saber-toothed cats. But it was the last period, the one we're going to do Thursday, that they were the most populous in. Camels and pigs. Your ancestors, it says early, not true. Your ancestors to your saber-tooth would have been feasting off of most of these herbivores, which are still in this period are still a little bit smaller. Like I said, the Neogene is when they really got big. And the reason why they got so large in the Ice Age is because, believe it or not, larger body sizes preserve body heat. So they don't cool off as fast. And that's part of the reason why when the Ice Age went away and it started warming up, they overheated some of them to death. They couldn't cool off, like heat stroke. There's multiple reasons why the Ice Age animals died. And yes, human predation was one of them. But we weren't the sole reason. All right, true elephants. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. They started evolving at the end of the Paleogene. You had evergreen trees everywhere. What am I hearing? Is that you, Alex? Turn off. The largest of all of the land animals came from this time period. That thing, believe it or not, is a hornless rhinoceros. It's a rhino ancestor. It puts it next to the modern day elephant. Okay, this is a modern day elephant. Paraceratherium. I have seen other names with here, like other side species, if you will, of this guy. But of all of the land mammals, not dinosaurs, land mammals, this was the largest of them all. I didn't put its specs on here. This is the first true elephant, Gophotherium. I didn't look these up. I'm going off my medical terminology pronunciation. The first true elephant actually had 4 tusks, okay, and the trunk wasn't like a nose, okay, the whole trunk opened, sort of like a duckbill, but like it was an elephant trunk. So, but that's of true elephants. It was the 3rd epoch of the Paleogene where they actually started evolving. And the tusks actually pointed down. They didn't like do the mammoth thing. The first of your mastodons are evolving in Egypt. Mastodons and mammoths are not the same thing. Mammoths are the really hairy ones. Okay, they're bigger. Okay, mastodons are forest dwellers, and they're not necessarily hairless, but they're more like the modern day elephant. So if they do have hair, it's really sparse, and they're smaller. They're not the same thing. Like I said, horses were evolving. The picture that I showed you was Mesohippus. Meohippus had 2 toes. Primitive beavers. Beavers got large, about this big. Okay, the giant beaver went extinct. The smaller, lesser beavers obviously made it through. If you've never seen a beaver, they're actually a lot bigger than you think they are. They're dog size. The first true primates are in Africa. Once again, human beings, not yet, but they came out of Africa too. Your modern dogs, cats, pigs, and your toothed whales are all happening by the end of this period. I remember if I have another slide. Yes, I do. I have one more slide. Now, at the very, very end of this period, and sort of the boundary between the Paleogene and the one we're going to do tomorrow, the Neogene. Oh, that's how many toes is on this one? 2. That is a Meohippus. The previous one that I showed you was a Mesohippus. I didn't put the Eohippus on here, which is the first, the 4-toed one. The last things that are happening with tectonics, the things that change the temperatures, and now we start having the uprise of mountains in the Neogene, the next one, the big cool off. Australia split off from Antarctica. Antarctica is going to the South Pole. It takes a little while to get there. Australia and its little island, New Guinea, if I'm remembering right, it starts moving more north to its current place. India's plate slams into Asia, which is starting to create the Himalayan mountains. That started at about 55 million years ago. Antarctica starts being covered by glaciers. That started about 35 million years ago. I'm pulling numbers that we wrote down yesterday. And because of glaciation, if the water is locked in ice, it's not available to be at the ocean, and the ocean floor, or the sea level starts to drop, and we start having land bridges. And so all of these things are happening at the end of the Paleogene. We got through this a heck of a lot faster than I expected. This does have a 10-question thing that goes along with it. I'm pretty sure it's in the same order as the notes. I normally try to, unless I'm running out of questions and I have to backtrack.
Miss, can I go get food, please?
Yes, you can go get food. Did you do your stuff? Did you already do your?
Oh, that.
Yes, everything, just,
You did? Okay. Let me stop my recording. Stop the recording.